So I know my fault. I shouldn't have said that. I know, that was my bad.
That's so
We're
true.
literally speaking. So,
It's literally,
eventually.
it's 10 years from now. Thanks. Anyways.
Sorry.
James and
Yeah.
her Heidi's sister passed away Tuesday.
I can do that. Hey, if I don't say that, remind me. Because I can't put on the list right now, but just remind me.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. Alright, let's go ahead and get started with class this evening. I'm glad that y'all all are here. I just want to go over a couple of things before we get started. One is, this is like a little thing, I guess, but me and Isabella are planning to go to the volleyball game Friday night. It's at 6 o'clock, and so y'all are welcome to come join us, and we're gonna root on our team. Charlie is part of our group. She'll be playing, and so we'll make sure that we're rooting them on. And so y'all are welcome to join. Come sit with us wherever we'll be. I'm not sure. Another thing is that, I guess just keep this in mind and put it on your calendar, that our fall retreat is on October 23rd through the 26th. If you're in clubs, just go and tell your club presidents, like, don't plan anything. That way everybody can be there. That'd be really cool. We're going to go to Sevierville, and I'll send out more details and stuff as we get closer to time, but maybe go ahead if you want to go. Mark that on your calendar. I think we're only going to have about 20 spots for students, and so we'll advertise it, and then when we do, then start signing up. And last thing is just we're going to go over our prayer list. And so a few things. Cole Rollins' grandma, Linda Hill, we announced this on Sunday, but she passed, and so we'll pray for his family. Reagan Roberts is just one of the students in my class, and I asked her if we could pray for the situation she told me about. She said yes. But I think she's an athlete. I want to say basketball. But her grandmother is not doing well, and she's in the hospital, and they're kind of preparing for her to pass, and it was really kind of tearing her up, and so I told her we'd be praying about that. And then also, of course, the Langer family and our country and things that have happened. Also, Ken told me that the guys, the James and Heidi guy, Heidi's sister, has passed, and so we'll pray for the Guy family as well. Is there anything else that we need to pray for in the room? Yeah, Em.
One of the girls in ACA's band had to be rushed to the hospital today. She had really bad bronchitis and stopped breathing.
Oh, my word.
She's
Okay.
in stable condition now, but very scary.
Yeah, wow, okay. All right, anything else? All right, let's go to Father in prayer. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for being our God and for hearing us. We are blessed that we're able to come before your throne and speak to you, praise you, and to bring requests before your feet. We ask that you be in multiple situations and multiple things that are happening around us. We ask that you be with the girl who is in the band at ACA who had that scary moment today, that she continues to recover and improve. That you also be with the Guy family over the loss of Heidi's sister, that you comfort that family. We ask that you be with Reagan Roberts and her grandmother as it appears that she is near the end of her life, that you comfort her and that you comfort her family in this loss. We ask that you be with the Langer family over the loss of Liesel, as well as just our country and the division and the tragedies that have occurred in recent days. It is a reminder, as many times as we think of it, it should be a reminder every time that this world is not our home and that we have something so much better waiting for us. We also are mindful of Cole's family over the loss of his grandma, Linda Hill, and we ask that you be with their family and comfort them as well. Lord, we know that you're a God of comfort, and we're so thankful that you are just that, and that you are our King. We love you. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. All right, so last week I wasn't able to be in class, and we did not live stream it because there was some maybe more personal information about Bo's baby who he is fostering. But this week, last week what we talked about, in case you weren't here, based on what I have gathered and what I asked him to speak on, we talked about what it means, thank you, Tommy, to be adopted by a family, the church. And we talked about the uniqueness of a family and what it should mean to someone who has been without and now does have a family. And this week, we're talking about the family name, the identity that you have. Your family name means something. And yes, it has a meaning like, I don't know, your family a long time ago had this occupation and now that's like your last name and stuff. Yeah, sure, that's a meaning. And your family name might be, like, have a meaning in the name, you know, like, who was it, Pierce, that talked about the meaning of names the other day? Mine was a gift of God, by the way, in case you forgot. But even our names have, those of you who are naughty know, I saw that was really sad. Even our names, you know, may have actual meaning. But what I mean when I say this is that your family likely has some kind of reputation, right? And by those who know you. Throughout history, there are some families who have been known by entire nations or even the entire world because of something. Whether it be one great act or thing, or just the consistency of something within their family. The Kennedys are an example. They're about as close as we're going to get to American royalty that we've ever had. I really didn't understand what a big deal they were, mostly because I wasn't alive when he was president. But when I went to the Northeast and literally everything was about Jackie Kennedy and everywhere that she was and stuff, I was like, I don't even know who this is, and I had to learn because everybody told me. So the Kennedy family, you know, they produced a president, senators, public servants, if you want to call them that, and they're known for just having, well, they're known for a lot of things. Some of them are like really big family scandals, like they did some crazy stuff, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but that's kind of some things that they're known for. They've got some loose morals, maybe. Now, does that characterize each one of them? Not necessarily, but because of their last name, they're all seen with that knowledge by the public. Oh, you're a Kennedy, and there's already some information going from that. The Ford family. This guy's Henry Ford, in case you didn't know. And the Ford family is mostly known because of him. He founded the Ford Motor Company. He pioneered the assembly line. He's the reason that we have 5-day work weeks, 40-hour work weeks. He pays people $5 a day, and that was like his wage, which is crazy to think about for now. So he contributed to America even just having a middle class. Like, he was a really big deal. Now, his family is still involved in the Ford Motor Company, but members of the family are also involved themselves in big charities. Some of them, one in particular, holds ownership in the Detroit Lions. I would have had no idea about that if I wouldn't have looked it up on Google. The only reason I know the Ford family is because this fellow who did something really big. And now the Ford family carries a name. And honestly, I don't really think it's going to matter what these people do unless it's like horrendous. Because they're always going to be known for Henry Ford. And when we hear the name Ford, we don't really think about all those people. We just think of Ford because of that big, Henry Ford, because of the great big act that he did. Now, there's a bunch of others. When you think of the Vanderbilts, you might think of wealth. When you think of the Waltons, you might think of Walmart because they own that. When you think of the Adams, like Samuel Adams and all them, you might think of politics. When you think of the Barrymores, who I honestly don't even know. I just read that they were a big deal family. You might think of Hollywood. I really have no idea. When you think of the Wright brothers, probably think of planes. When you think of the James family, of the LeBron variety, you might think of basketball. You might think of basketball. Every family has a reputation with their name. If you're known for something, then it doesn't even necessarily matter who you specifically are, because you're already known as something, as someone, right? Because of your last name. Now, read with me in 2 Corinthians 5:17, and we're also going to read Galatians 2:20. Somebody want to get those on the screen? Read those.
Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature. The old things passed away. Behold, the new things have come.
You could go ahead. Yeah, keep trucking.
I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me.
Okay, so what do these verses tell us about who we are, about our name?
That we're new.
Okay, that we're new. Sure. What else? Or someone want to elaborate on that?
That our identity is no longer in our fleshly identity, but in the spirit.
Right. So we wear a new name. We're dead to who we used to be. We used to have a name, but that name's gone. And it's not really a sad farewell, like, oh man, I missed my name. It's like, good riddance. I'm getting rid of that one. Because I don't want to any longer bear this name. Because the one that I get to have, when I get to have new life, is so much better. It's such a better name. And so we bear the name of Christ. We get that in Galatians 2, right? I've been crucified, dead. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but it's Christ who lives in me. That's the name that I bear now. Now keep these texts in mind as we move on, because they're kind of going to serve, these ideas are kind of going to serve as our foundation for the rest of what we talk about. Names carry weight, not necessarily because of their original meanings or their origin, I guess, or the meaning of their names, but because of reputation. What do people in the family do? What are they known for? As someone who is adopted into the family, that's been our theme all year. For those of you who this might be your first time on a Wednesday, that all year we're talking about adoption from Ephesians chapter 1 and what that may correlations between what we know about adoption and what it looks like for the Father to adopt us. As someone who's adopted into the family, these are the things you need to know. What is my family known for? How do I need to adapt to how people are going to think of me because of the last name that I now have? And because you now bear a last name, a family name, your words and your actions reflect onto your family. And so what kind of image do we now bear? So let's look together in 1 Peter chapter 1. Some of these verses, all the verses will be on the screen, but it's also helpful just to have your own Bible open. You can look at context and stuff. Now let's talk about context, actually. Peter is writing to, if you look in verse 1, Peter says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who reside as aliens. So Peter says he's writing to aliens, or your translation might say sojourners or exiles, or I don't know, maybe something different, who are scattered throughout Asia Minor. And these Christians are from, a number of different places. But it says that they are scattered, aliens who are scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Fun fact, that is in the order by which a messenger would have delivered them, which I think is cool. So Peter goes ahead and says, we're going to start here, and the messenger is going to go down the line and get all these places. So I thought that was a fun fact. But this word aliens, like I said, it could be translated exiles or sojourners. Now think with me. What is Peter trying to say by using this title? I think he's got kind of a twofold effect. What is Peter trying to say about the people he's writing to by calling them aliens or exiles or sojourners? What do you think?
I think we sing the song in worship, like, this world is not my home. So by us being sojourners, we're not bound to this world anymore.
Okay, so that's absolutely part of it. We're going to talk about that, a lot, but a little bit more in a second. Is that part of it is we don't belong here. And so we have traded, in getting a new name, we also get a new home, right? So we don't really belong here anymore. Now, what else could Peter be thinking about with these Christians that he's writing to? Why would he call them aliens? And maybe it helps to know a little bit of context, but I think you can get there without it.
Are they not saved? Are they lost?
No. So he's writing to the church, and so that would be a fair thought. But he's writing to the church, and these people are being treated poorly. And it's not necessarily to where it will be when you get to, I think it's like 111 and 112, where Pliny the Younger is going to really start persecuting Rome, is going to really start persecuting the churches here in these places. But they are, in some ways, being persecuted, and I think it's a lot by their neighbors, by just people around them, Jews and whatnot, as well as, I would imagine, the government. So why would Peter call them aliens? Is there another reason? I think Solomon got the main one, but I think there's something else we could talk about.
Is it because they're not born into like the Jew race?
Okay, yeah, so I see what you're saying. So like they're Gentiles, and so people are like hating on them. And I think you're getting close. Is that, the idea I think under that is the case, which is everybody around them sees them, people who don't belong, right? And so what you have is these Christians who live in essentially the backwoods of Asia Minor. Like, none of these cities are like city centers or big deals. There's nowhere that you really want to be. And so these are places that will soon be heavily persecuted by Rome, like I mentioned, early 2nd century. But for now, they're probably just being persecuted on a more popular level by those around them, like their neighbors and such. And so in this sense, they're aliens because everyone recognizes them as people who don't belong. That's how it seems to be. Everybody around them is like, hey, you're not conforming to what's happening. You're causing issues. You don't belong here. And they're right. They probably don't know how right they are, but they're right. And so this gets to Solomon's point. These Christians don't belong. And this is the other sense in which Peter uses the word, and I think that this is probably the main one he's trying to get across. They don't belong where they are. And it's not that they're longing for somewhere like Palestine or Jerusalem, nor are they longing for some big city centers like they just want to live somewhere better. They're longing for the heavenly city. And in that way, they are certainly exiles. Now, Peter also uses the word scattered. Yours might say the dispersion or something like that. And this word carries some weight for people like Peter, because Peter's a Jew. If you didn't know, Jews get scattered a lot throughout the Bible. But, and so this idea is, I don't know, they would call it, the whole movement is called like the diaspora or something, or the dispersion is the idea. But it refers to when Jews were scattered from their homeland, in Jerusalem, because of exile in a couple of different really times and such. And so this is a title that Peter, as a Jew, and Jews would read this as that, but he takes that idea of a dispersion or being scattered and now applies it to the church as part of their identity. And it's kind of a natural fit, right? Because they're people who are exiled. They're people who don't belong. And so now you're away from home. And you're scattered throughout all of Asia Minor, all these places, but you're all longing for the same place. So this exile experienced by the church is not one like the Jews. So there's a big difference, I think, and this is only worth talking about because of a point we're about to make, and then we'll move on into the text. Jews were scattered a lot. We just talked about it. And they're scattered in exile in Babylon and a bunch of other times. Rome kind of gets mad at Jews and sends them out. It's kind of Claudius a little later on. And so all this maybe a little earlier. And so there's all this scattering. People hate Jews, apparently, and so they just keep pushing them out, okay? Now, the reason for that, like when Romans exiled Jews, is because of their religion. They practiced Judaism, but also their ethnicity. They were Jews, like it was their nationality. Now, Jews, you could not be a practicing Jew, and they could still kick you out, exile you, because you were a Jewish by ethnic identity, like your nationality. The church, this is the difference here. The church here, Christians, are exiled by choice. The people around those in the communities, as well as later on when they're persecuted by the government and stuff in these regions very harshly, all these people are all persecuting those who choose to be Christians. Like, these people know the costs, and they could say, I just won't be a Christian, and then I won't be considered an alien, and I won't be persecuted by those around me, and yet they're choosing. And in the other sense as well. They could be a Jew and their home be Jerusalem, but they're saying, no, I'm choosing to be in exile where this world is not my home, and I'm choosing the heavenly city instead. And so kind of in the same way that Peter used the word in a twofold kind of way, that's the same way that the church chooses it. We'll choose persecution. That means we get to go home. It means we get to be in our heavenly city. Exile is worth it. Bearing the name of Christ and experiencing the suffering that Jesus experienced is worth it when you know the eternal life that's waiting. And so Peter goes on to talk about what God's done for his people. You kind of look through verses 3 through 9. Give me 1 second. Okay. Look through kind of verses 3 through 9. And you see, this is what God's done for his people. He's extended salvation to his people. And then he starts talking about the prophets. And the prophets who prophesied about Jesus, but they never saw him. In verses 10 through kind of the beginning of 12. That's kind of what he talks about. And he says, in verse 12, it was revealed to them that they were not, we're talking about prophets here, that they were not serving themselves, but you, the audience, Christians, in these things which now have been announced to you through those who preach the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven. What he says is these prophets didn't serve themselves, but instead they serve the church today, because the church is the one who was able to live in the time of Jesus. Several New Testament writers describe it as the later days or the latter days. This is the time of Jesus, and it's the time that we are blessed to live in. And so Peter goes on to really talk about what a blessing and a privilege it is when he says at the end of verse 12, things into which angels long to look. That's kind of a weird verse, right? Like, what in the world does that mean? And maybe I can't give you every detail. But Peter describes this opportunity that we're talking about here, the fact that Jesus has come and God's promises and these prophecies that have been given are fulfilled in Jesus. Peter describes this opportunity to see all this as things into which angels long to look. And the word for long to look is not one that just says angels are kind of sitting idly by, kind of peeking around the corner. It means angels, it paints the picture that angels are stooping down and looking intently. Like, it's giving us the idea that, man, angels would love to know what God's prophecies and his promises are going to look like. But the problem, the issue is, it wasn't really for them. Jesus wasn't to them, and Jesus wasn't for them. That the fulfillment of the prophecies happened for us. So it is for us that Jesus came and he died. And so the church is privileged in knowing Jesus. We get to know him. We got to see him. And he came and died for us. Now, that connects us to verse 13. Okay, let's just read. We got a few verses on the screen, but let's just read verse 13, whoever wants to.
Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Be sober in spirit. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ.
Okay. First word is therefore. Every time you see therefore, what do you do?
Wonder what it's there for.
Oh, there we go. I never actually say it like that, but y'all pretty much got the point. I always just say look backward, because the wonder what it's there for thing kills me. But you're totally right, and it's all the same idea. So, we get therefore up on the screen. What is the thought that Peter's connected? That's why we talk about that stuff, so we can get here. So, what's the thought that Peter's connected?
No matter what happens, to keep your mind like ready to defend God and like stay Christian.
Okay, yeah, so that's what verse 13 is talking about. That's true. We'll get there in just a second. But anytime you see therefore, it means we're connecting two thoughts. It's like a bridge. Like, there's this thought. I'm trying to move on to this thought, but let me put therefore in the middle so you understand that it all connects. So what before it is connecting to where we're at now? What's the train of thought?
You're being persecuted.
Not yet. Almost.
That the divine plan is like it's made for us, and the angels are looking down, desiring to be a part of it. So in light of that, we should keep that in mind with reverence and steady our minds and our hearts.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about actually that word reverence here, or fear, in a second. But yeah, and so he's kind of saying, hey, since you are so blessed and privileged to live in the time of Jesus, hey, it's time to act. It's time to prepare. This isn't something to take lightly. You got a responsibility here. And so he says, because we get to live in the time of Jesus, he's about to give us a string of commands, and really these commands go on until, I think, chapter 5, verse 11, of just like frequent, like this. But here's the string of commands. He says, therefore, prepare your minds for action, which literally is gird up the hips of your minds, which is why that's not on the screen, because why would you ever say it like that? It's super weird. But for Peter, for us to think about that, it would be weird. For Peter to say that, it's a word picture. He's trying to express to the reader the need to prepare for action. He says, stand up, put on your garments, and be ready for physical action, which is similar to the thought we get in Exodus chapter 12, verse 11. You remember when God was telling his people how to take of the Passover? And he pretty much says the exact same thing of like, hey, have your belt on, shoes on, you're ready to rock. That way, when you're done with this and everything happens and it's time to go, you're out of here. And so we're ready for action. There's urgency in this command. Prepare yourselves to fight, to have resolve. You're going to keep pushing. So he says, therefore, prepare your minds for action and keep sober in spirit, which literally is just be sober. And so I don't exactly know why would they added in spirit, unless I guess it's just I don't know. There's probably a reason, but literally it's just be sober. Have good judgment. Have a clear mind as you are preparing yourselves. And then he says, Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. This is what we're preparing for. The revelation of Jesus Christ. We must prepare our minds and ensure that we have clear thoughts and clear judgments so that we can recognize anything that could deter us from where our hope is fixed. Where is our hope fixed? On Jesus coming back. Okay. So just talking about verse 13. We're not looking at the rest of them just yet. We're almost there. What does this verse tell us about the identity that we now have? You're part of a family now who has this identity. What does this tell us?
Be ready to lean on Jesus and not what you were used to.
Okay? And so part of it is, as a family, we all eagerly await the return of Jesus. Philippians chapter 3, verse 20 describes it that way, or Paul is speaking. He describes it that way. We're eagerly awaiting for Jesus to come back. As a family. Okay? That's one thing. What's another thing? Another thing. As a family, we prepare our minds for distractions or for things that could deter us from the hope we have. Because we all have the same hope. We all have the same goal. So we're all working together to make sure our minds are prepared for that. That is part of your identity now. It's part of your job, what your family does. So now that's what you do. If someone's going to have an answer over there, I apologize. I didn't hear you in time. I just started looking at each other and stuff. Okay, anyways. All right, verse 14. Can someone read verse 14 for me?
As obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts. Sorry, I gotta put my glasses. Which were yours in your ignorance.
Okay, does that verse, first of all, does that verse sound familiar to anybody? Like, do you hear that? You're like, oh, that kind of sounds like this verse.
Romans 12.
Hey-o, let's go. Romans 12. Why? Because the word conformed. And so we're going to talk about that in just a second. I just want to see if anybody else would get it. First he says, as obedient children. So now Peter's talking about this relationship that we have with the Father. What does an obedient child do when brought into the family of God? Now, how much time do we have? 15 minutes? Okay. This is going to determine if I ask a question or not. I'm not going to ask the question. I think that there's some comfort in Peter calling them obedient children. My question was going to be, why would that be comforting? But I'll tell you the answer. It reminds the people here. Remember, we're talking about those people who are struggling, suffering. It reminds them that they're not suffering because of their own name or reputation. It's not for myself that I'm suffering. It's not for myself. Have you ever heard of people who, maybe if they are, they have a family and they're really overweight and they want to live longer, and it's really not because they want to live longer, but because they have a family and they know that their family needs them to live longer, and that's what got them in the gym. You've ever heard something like that? I think a similar kind of idea, I guess, is kind of presented here, where I'm not suffering for my own accord here. Like I'm not just suffering for my name. My name, Kidwell, means nothing. Who cares? I'm suffering for Christ, and that's something that we all get to share in because it's all the same name that we have. And so you've got a family now who's going to suffer for the same name, but that all inherit the same reward. And they have a Father who sees them and knows their struggles. And so, man, they'll choose the life of pain and being shamed and all this other stuff. They'll choose that if it means they get to be a part of that family. So he says, as obedient children, this is what you're going to do. Do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance. Those in the family used to be people of the world, used to not bear the name. But people of the world are conformed to their own desires. In Stilgers, last week we wrote down, we're supposed to have written down, Colossians 3 verses 1 through 4. I only got it 10 times, it's supposed to be 14. Cherith is actually the only one who did it, so, everybody, anyways. In verses 5 through 7 of Colossians chapter 3, he talks about those in the church were formerly those who lived according to the passions of their flesh, however they wanted. Their own passions and desires and impurities and whatever. That's what they lived by. They danced to the tune of their own desires, and that was what controlled them. They were enslaved to their own passions. In Romans chapter 12, what John was getting at, verse 2 gets to the same idea, and he uses the same word for conformed. And it says that those in the family of God, and we're picking up a little bit of words here from Peter's family and whatnot, but those in the family of God cannot be molded by the world because you're different now. You're exiles in this world with a purpose that is beyond the world. So you can't find your identity with what is created. Paul calls for not the conforming of your mind to the world, but the transformation of your mind so that, what's the reason? You might remember the verse? Chapter 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewal of your mind, so that you may, good job, Lane, discern what the will of God is, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Lane's so smart, he got it. And so that's the whole point. What leads to eternity? That is what you are transforming your mind for. You're not conforming to the world. You're transformed now. Why? Because you're part of the family. And that's who the family is. That is what we all are looking for. All right, let's read verses 15 and 16. Toby, you're well hydrated now. Can you read verses 15 and 16?
Of course. But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior, because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy.
So what does this tell us about who we are? Verses 15 and 16.
You to be set apart.
Are you to be set apart? Nope. We use the set apart idea a lot. Let's flesh that out. Our job is to be holy because our Father is holy. And this is an idea that we'll explore in a couple weeks, some more, 2 or 3 weeks, some more. So I won't stay on it too long. But why describe God as the Holy One? You know, God's got a lot of names you could call him, right? You could call him a bunch of things. Earlier we just called him the Father, I think. We're going to call him the Father again in just a second. But here he says, the Holy One. So why describe God as the Holy One? And what does that mean for his children? Thoughts?
You know, there's fathers on earth, and there's people that can show love and be faithful or at different times, but there's no one like God who's completely holy.
Right. That's a really good point. So God is set apart from all else. He's righteous and he's just in all that he does and all that he is. And because of this, all who are his children bear the same quality. People who are set apart. Those who are children of the Holy One were called to holiness, meaning that we no longer belong to the world. We belong to a place that transcends the world. It's a higher calling. He says, be holy, for I am holy. And that occurs 4 different times in Leviticus. And he seems to be quoting this one from chapter 11, verse 44, which is toward the beginning of the holiness code. Does anybody know what the holiness code is in Leviticus? All these rules and stuff about holiness. You know what that is? Quinn, what is it? I know you're smiling. I know you want to say it.
I was talking with my uncle. He said that there's like 4 different criteria for holiness, and maybe something similar you're thinking of.
Maybe not.
But
He's a lot smarter than I am.
So.
No, I shouldn't have asked Quinn. He's going to go too far into details. But we're looking big here. I love Quinn. Well, we're looking big here. And the holiness code was for the whole nation here of Israel. It wasn't just priests. There's some things in Leviticus and stuff that are just for priests. It's like, hey, wash yourselves at this time, sacrifice things at this time. This one's for everybody, the whole nation. And it's for a nation of dirty, unholy people to be seen as holy by God, somehow. And it's in this context that Peter chooses to pull. It occurs about 4 different times, just be holy for I am holy. And Peter pulls it from the beginning of the Holiness Code, chapter 11, verse 44. The Holiness Code goes from chapter 11 to verse 20. And it's all just, this is how you can be holy before God and all the rules and commands you need to live. And so, it's this context that Peter seems to pull on. But instead of a list of ritual laws, Peter's going to reference their behavior. See that end of verse 15. So to recognize God as holy is essentially to recognize him as God, right? Like God alone is God. Well, God alone is holy. And so anything that is reserved for just God to use, you can think about this in the temple context too. Anything that is reserved for just God to use is considered also holy. And so to live with the name God's child must mean that you behave as one who is holy, set apart for only the usage of God, God alone. You only live for God, not for self in your own passions and desires. And that's a choice that is made by the one who's in the family. It's a life that we choose. But let's go to verses 17 through 19. Someone want to read that for me?
If you address as Father the one who impartially judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves in fear during the time of your stay on earth, knowing that you were not redeemed with perishable things like silver or gold from your futile way of life, inherited from your forefathers, but with precious blood, as of a lamb unblemished and spotless, the blood of Christ.
So let's start in just verse 17. It says, if you address as Father the one who impartially judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves in fear during the time of your stay on earth. Sounds like a hotel, right? Like, you're in and you're out. So during your stay on earth, mind how you conduct yourselves. You know, sometimes the people who are closest to you or your family are the ones who probably get your worst. You know how that goes? It's like you're in public or you're with a big group or whatever. You're going to give them your best because you want to put forward a good, a good step forward, a good name. You want to make sure you treat people well. But when you get around the people who you're comfortable with, then you're a little bit more willing to be like, all right, I'm good. Like, I'm done for the day. And maybe you're not as kind and patient as you would be with the people you work with or go to school with or whatever. You're comfortable with them. And so I think Peter's kind of getting to this idea here. Peter seems to be saying, yeah, you're familiar with God, the Father, right? He says, if you address the Father, if you address as Father, the one, the Holy One, who impartially judges according to each one's work. And so we're talking about the Father here, who you're comfortable with. And when he says you cannot let God, who judges impartially, be the one that you lose fear of. Because he is your Father, he should always be feared. And so what is this mindset that Peter seems to convey in this text, especially verse 17? Well, here it is. We're on this earth temporarily. So live as people who are here temporarily. This is what the family of God does. This is who you are now as someone who's in the family. You should be known as someone who doesn't belong here. And that's how you should conduct yourself. One who is reserved for the usage of God. Remember, I think that's such a cool idea. Is that we are set apart for God's usage alone, and that's what makes us holy. If you are going to be set apart for God's usage alone, then you can't be used for the conformity of the world. You're not the world's to use or own or have it. You're only God's. And what seems to be the motivating factor for that mindset? Look at verses 18 and 19. He says, conduct yourselves in fear during the time of your stay on earth, knowing that you were not redeemed with perishable things like silver or gold from your futile ways of life inherited from your forefathers, but with precious blood, as of a lamb unblemished and spotless, the blood of Christ. What seems to be the motivating factor for the mindset? Knowing your value. Knowing what you're worth. So Peter uses this idea, or this word redeemed. And this word redeemed has lots of roots in Greco-Roman stuff, in their culture. Okay, so slave owners. If you wanted to sell a slave, or get rid of a slave, I guess, you go to this temple, you could go to a temple, and then tell the temple that's how much the slave is worth. The temple could buy the slave, they would take a little bit for their own, commission, and then they would give you as a slave owner the money. Your slave would go work for the temple now, and now you've got some money. It's manumission. And what essentially is happening is the slave would be set free from you as the master, but now the slave is a slave to the God of the temple. So you just transfer, basically. And so Peter uses the word redeemed to refer to the manumission, that process, of God's people, going from slaves to our own desires and death to his own slaves. I brought this up a couple times recently because of my Biblical Worldview 1 class. I thought it was cool. If you look at the beginning of your Faulkner ESV Bible, it gives you this whole translation philosophy, and it gives you this whole paragraph on just the word doulos, which is it can be servant, but it can also be bondservant or slave. And it goes through as Americans, we're going to see the word slave really terribly, and they kind of go through some history of that wasn't always the case, but then they say this is how we're going to choose the word. And so they say anytime that the word is used to show complete ownership, we're going to choose the word slave. And then the other ones are kind of varying degrees of freedom and stuff. But I thought that was interesting. And so in Romans 6, when we're described as slaves of God, instruments for him, and then it's slaves, they choose that word. And then Peter kind of plays on this slave idea here to say, now we were slaves owned by the world and our own desires, and we were going to death, but now we are owned by God. And so now we are used however the master pleases. This is the life that the Christian chooses. We are God's and his family, and we are holy in that we are reserved for the usage of God alone. And that price, what he bought us with, was his son. So he says, verse 18, like silver or gold from your futile way of life inherited from your forefathers. Some of these people could have come from important families or could have inherited religious or cultural items from their fathers. And some of them might have been beautiful. You know, some of the stuff they might have had might have been awesome for their culture or whatever. And yet Peter considers them futile compared to the holy way of life that they are now to live, because it leads to eternity, which is so much better. So this is the inheritance of the children of God. So he says our reason to fear or revere God is not only found in the fact that he is our impartial judge, like he's just in how he judges, and so that should bring us some reverent fear in knowing that about God, but it should also come from a place of gratitude, knowing that he sent Jesus to die, to redeem us from what we owed, which was death. And Tommy talked about this a couple weeks ago. Our value is found in the blood of Christ, is that he redeemed us. Our purchase price was not perishable items, as Peter says, but is the blood of Christ. So we get this in verse 20 and 21. We got a little bit of time, but Bill always rings early, so ignore that. Reading verses 20 and 21 with me. For he was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but he has appeared in these last times for the sake of you, who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. We get this rich theological statement here. Jesus appeared for our sake. It is God who raised Jesus from the dead and lifted him up to glory at God's right hand. And it is our faith, is our belief, what is lived out, not just the belief that we have, but the faith that we live, how we live is faithfully. And our hope is all in God. All in God. Now let's get to verse 22 and 23. Joe, do you want to get that?
Just 22 and 23?
Yeah, just the bottom part.
Since you have, in obedience to the truth, purified your souls for a sincere love of the brethren. Fervently love one another from the heart, for you have been born again, not of the seed which is perishable, but imperishable, that is through the living and enduring word of God.
So this is the result of being people who have been redeemed. They're not only changed in mind, but they're changed in soul. Their very being is purified by God. And the result of their conversion in relation to others is this. Now you sincerely love your siblings. And yet we're called to deepen that love. Not just one that's intellectual, but one that is in our heart, from our deepest passions and desires. Our goal is to maintain the unity of the family of God. If you think about that, I think that's uncommon. It's uncommon for a group of people to prioritize unity successfully. And I think about the world. Think about people who would be new to the family, how they might struggle with this idea. Ones who have put themselves first for so long, and now they think, now let me start putting other people first. It's a hard idea. We even see it now sometimes with Christians, right? New Christians who are in the church, but then an argument happens, or something said that they really don't like, and then they're gone. Well, the reason for that is just they don't know what it's like. They don't understand the family yet, because the family maintains unity. We push through those little things like that. And this should be a comforting thought as well. All right, we're going to close. Those in the family of God, we have a new life. It means we're born again. Your life is completely different, completely new, and it's full of love, both for God and for your family. Just like what you've been bought with was not perishable. The life that you have now is not perishable. It is life that is received through the living and enduring Word of God. It's active and it withstands all. Here's some conclusions that we'll go. Here's the main things I think we can learn. If you're going to be adopted into this family, who is your family? What are you to act like? All right. Well, one is be prepared to live in a world where you don't belong. What that means is people around you aren't going to understand you. They're going to say, you don't belong here. You live differently. You don't belong to this world. And they're right. So embrace it. You don't belong to the world. You are going to live differently. That's how you are now, because of the name that you bear. So embrace it. 2, be holy as the Father is holy. You are not belonged by anyone else. You belong only to God. Your usage is only for God. You are not an instrument to unrighteousness. You are not something for the world to use or abuse your gods. Therefore, you're holy. Your body, your soul, your mind, God's. Last one. Place a high priority on unity. A high priority. And the whole, just like look through the New Testament, you'll see it everywhere. And what that looks like, well, maybe look at Philippians 2 or elsewhere. But what we get here is that we sincerely, deeply love our brothers and sisters because we're part of the family now. And the family gets through the difficult times. Okay? Sorry for keeping you late. Let me know if you have any questions. I think that's all. And so we get to go. Like, technically 2. Now it's 2. Yeah, real time 2. But it felt like 5 because of the bell. I hate that the bell goes so early.
It keeps getting earlier.
I know. Well, like the power went out the other